Hey guys, want to welcome you to another edition of Halftime Chats. And today I am happy to welcome record executive, record producer, and even now gospel artist, Mr. Stanley Brown. Um, he's been involved. I think he produced Don't I'm Dreaming with Crystal Williams. He has worked with Ron DMC, LL Cool J. He's worked with Jackie McGee. He's worked across the industry back in the 90s. Then he moved to become an executive, and now he formed his own record label and about to release his own solo project. So it's going to be great listening to Stanley here about his career, behind the scenes stuff, and yeah, we just take it from there. Okay, we're about to bring in Stanley into the system.
Buddy, can you hear me?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yes. How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Okay. Definitely, it's a privilege to be able to speak with you and come from your studio, I see.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Question, what is the correct pronunciation of your name?
So I know the double N, it's Namdi.
Namdi. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
My parents are
Yes.
Nigerian. So even though I was born here, yeah, I'm Nigerian, so it's a Nigerian name.
Okay.
Yes.
Namdi. Yes, man. This is great. Thank you so much. I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to this.
yeah, definitely. Now we've got an international audience. I'm here in the UK. We've got people from Nigeria, America, UK, around the world who listen in. So I always stop my interview by asking my guests where you're sort of born and raised, so we can get a sort of a geography of your life.
Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So where were you born and raised?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. Sir.
New York City, in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
Brooklyn, New York. Yes.
Okay. Now,
Yes.
for those of us who are familiar with American culture, we hear Brooklyn and we think of Biggie, and they seem to have amplified the city of Brooklyn. But what's it like? What was it like growing up in Brooklyn?
I mean, I grew up in the days where there were kids playing outside, stickball, basketball hoops, block parties. It was just an amazing time, growing up in Bedford Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, actually where Biggie Smalls was born and living. And Jay-Z and
Oh,
Big Daddy Kane and all of these guys. So I grew up right in the heart of Bedford Stuyvesant. So for me, my childhood was a lot of fun. Back in those days, the kids went outside and played stickball and baseball. And so when I wasn't playing stickball or any sports, I was always playing instruments inside the house. My brothers were DJs, so I would mess around with their turntables and listen to their albums and records, and that's how I fell in love with music.
okay. And then what was your family? How many was it? How many? What was the size of your family?
Seven boys, seven
Seven.
brothers, seven brothers and one sister.
Wow.
Yes.
My goodness. I mean, that
Yeah.
sounds like how did your parents cope with having seven kids?
Well, I came up in a one parent home, just my
Oh,
mother, who did an amazing job raising seven boys and one girl by herself. It was something to see the strength of a woman. But it was fun because it was all majority of boys and a lot of wrestling and boxing and playing sports together and arguing, all the things that boys do. So it was an amazing, warm, loving household my entire life.
so out of the eight, where are you in the middle, the oldest, the youngest?
I'm
Or?
I'm next to the youngest.
Okay, okay, okay. So you are the Randy Jackson of the family, right? So,
I'm the Randy Jackson. I'm the Randy Jackson. Yes.
okay, okay. Wow, but then it, Did you have was your mom have it was your dad the children of all the father of all eight of you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And but he left and so just left your mom?
Yeah, whole story behind that. Yeah. That's for the book.
Okay, okay, that's fine. But how did that affect you though? Just I mean, how old were you when he left? And just
Um, probably 7, 8. I don't know. But for me, having older brothers who were like brothers and father figures, I didn't miss it, to be honest with you, because I had uh amazing brothers, older brothers who were just great guys, hardworking brothers, loving brothers, caring brothers. So I never felt absent of an example. You know what I'm saying? Or elderly or father figure, because my brothers were always all things to me.
your oldest brother, what's what's the age gap? So when you were seven, how old was he? The oldest.
I have you I don't know. I don't know how my brothers are.
Oh goodness.
There's so many of them I lose count.
Okay. 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 So I'm the eldest, so I have no idea what it's like being the youngest and thinking if you've had
Yeah,
eight people ahead of
exactly.
you, what's the okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So getting into the music then, did I mean how you mentioned about the play turntables and listen to records, the actual instruments itself, did you ever get to touch those and
Yes, actually, my oldest brother, Thomas, we call him Sonny, he always had turntables and mixers in the house. So I would just mess around with his equipment. While he was at work, I would sneak into his room and mess around with his gear, and I would get in trouble for it later. But other than outside of that, we were a strong spiritual family. Grew up in the church. Back in those days, I mean, we went to church all the time. For me, as a young kid, it almost felt like we were in church 7 days a week. So that's when I learned how to play the drums and fell in love with playing the drums, because in my day, say if you went to church in the morning, you didn't get home till late at night, because there was a morning service, then there was an afternoon service, and then there was an evening service, right? So in between those services, I would mess around with the drums, and my mother saw that I had some interest in drums, and she invested and brought me a drum set. And that's really how things started for me as a musician.
Okay, so it's when you say drum set, this isn't like the machine, it's the actual set of drums.
Actually, a set of drums.
Okay.
Actually, a set of drums. That was the first instrument that I learned to play. And then I started playing keyboards and organ and things like that. So, but the drums initially was my first instrument.
Now, when you think of drums, you think of noise and you think of unless you had a garage at the back and you play your drums, where were you playing your
Oh, it
drums?
was it was loud. It was definitely loud in the house.
And the neighbors didn't seem to bother when this your kids playing.
Nobody bothered. They didn't care. I was just a kid playing the drums. They were okay with it.
Wow. So did you play not just in church, but did you play with the band or what was your sort of schooling?
As I got older, I played with some kids in the neighborhood. We would call ourselves having a band. But like I said earlier, Namdi, in those days, there were a lot of what we call block parties, where they would block off the streets and they would have food on the streets and all type of activities for the kids. But there were always live bands
Wow.
that would just come outside of their house and their front doors, and they would just play full bands. And that's when I was really captivated and I was mesmerized by the music. And I would sit there for hours and hours and hours just watching these bands play. And that's what started to form my love and desire to really, really want to be a musician.
Wow. Now, and those days had when you were young, had hip hop taken off, or what was the music that you were inspired by as a kid?
I was I was just inspired by all music and especially gospel music, like the
Ah,
Hawkins family, listening to the Hawkins family on the radio, and then going to church. We had amazing choirs and music departments, and the I grew up in a church where there was a phenomenal musician in every church. So that's what sparked me and wanted and made me want to be able to learn even more and go deeper in the craft. But that's really what started to steer me.
it seems as if that in the sort of the 80s, the church was the breathing ground for a lot of our producers and singers of the 90s. Um, but then what happens in the 70s and 60s, I don't know if they still were learning in church or something different, but it just seems as if majority of our 90s of all would go back to church, singing, playing, and getting all that stuff from the church. What was it about sort of the environment of the church when it came to playing music that you think helped you hone your craft as a musician and a producer?
Being in the environment, choir rehearsals. My mother was a singer.
Okay.
Saying she was one of the lead singers at our church, but my grandmother was a musician. My grandmother was an organist
Goodness.
in Columbia, South Carolina, where I would spend a majority of my summers in South Carolina with my grandmother, watching her teach the choir, watching her teach piano and singers at the senior citizens
Mm.
centers. I just had to sit there for hours upon hours and watch that because there was nothing else to do. So all of that played a part in shaping what would later on become something that I would learn to love.
Yeah. The at that point in time, the when you're playing the music, how much of the sort of the spiritual aspect of being in a church were you taking in, or were you just like, okay, good, I'm going to church so I can play the music?
Man, I grew up in a very Pentecostal, apostolic, Holy Ghost filled church, man. And not only were you going to hear it, you was going to feel it at the same
Wow.
time. So there was a lot of praying and laying hands on the gift and all of that kind of stuff, man, played a part because back in those days too, not only was learning a gift and a skill was important, they saw to it that we prayed as much as we played. You,
Wow.
you understand? So that also played a part in shaping the spiritual side of what we do as well.
And so that's interesting. Do you think that those who, especially in your church, did they see the possibilities of if we anoint our gifted musicians, and even if they go into outside of the church to play, they can take their spiritual gift as well as the technical gift? Or was it like, yeah, we're cultivating these musicians to stay within the church family? When you reflect back, what do you think?
Yes, a little, I mean, a little bit of both. Because there were some churches, that if you said that you were going to use your gift and you were going to go play secular music, right?
Mm,
That was a bad thing.
okay.
They were kind of against that. And then there was some pastors and churches that were a little bit more open and liberal to the opportunities that it would afford the musician in being able to take care of his livelihood and his family and whatever his lifestyle required. Some people were understanding of that, and then there were another group who were not so understanding, to the point where you were almost condemned to going to hell if you decided to work on the other side of the aisle. So it was a little bit of both.
What was the case for yourself?
Well, for me, early on, I know when I first had an opportunity to go play with the R&B group early on, it was a group called Guy,
You
R&B group.
can't.
Yes, with my good friend Teddy Riley and Aaron Hall and Damien and the late Bernard Bell.
Oh
I had
gosh.
an opportunity to tour with them, and the conversation at home with my mother, it wasn't so easy. You know, she kind of it would be her desire and wishes that I would just stay and just played at the church solely, but she understood it and prayed about it and prayed over me, and I started to work in other genres of music.
Okay, so before I skip and jump, any of your other siblings play music or as well?
Not a note.
Okay, so just yourself.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so just yourself.
Yeah.
When did you then? How were you in high school? And were you academic and then playing, or what was it like for you?
School was great for me. I loved reading. I loved it. Everything about school. But I did fall in love with music. Even at school, you know, playing in the little bands or what have you. I would always kind of sneak into the auditoriums.
Yeah.
Um, Probably at times when I wasn't supposed to be in there. And because they had a piano.
Mm,
So I would gravitate to the rooms that had instruments, and I would spend
wow.
time in there playing the piano. And whenever there was an instrument in the room, I found my way to it.
Wow. When did you then decide, think that actually I could actually have a career in this? What did you think of going to college after high school?
No, because funny, right after high school, I met there was a young man who was a drummer at my church, Bobby Walker, who introduced me to his cousin, Jason Mizell. Jason Mizell was the cousin of Jason Mizell was Jam Master Jay from Run DMC. So I was introduced to Jam Master Jay. I was invited to his house to work on some music, to play keyboards, and I never left. I was like, this is what I want to do. I'm in a house with Run, DMC, Jam Master Jay, Russell Simmons. Everybody's in the apartment all day, every day. And I just wanted to be a producer. And Jam Master Jay became my mentor. And he started to teach me how to produce, how to make records. And I never looked back from that moment on.
Did you know who Ron DMC? I mean, did you realize how big they were at that time? Were they?
Of course. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. So what was it like when you first got introduced to, I mean, and some we talk about destiny and stuff, but why were you introduced given this opportunity?
Because as I stated, Bobby was the cousin of Jam Master Jay, and Bobby told me that they were looking for a keyboard player to work on some
Ah,
music. So
okay.
he brought me to meet Jason, and that's how things started to happen.
Wow. What did your mom think when you said when you were, did you tell her that, look, I don't think I'm going to go to college. I think this is what I want to be doing?
She was okay with it. She knew I loved music, and she's like, as long as you understand the risk, you understand of not continuing and pursuing a
Education.
college degree. So at that point, I knew I had to really, really work hard, and I had to be great, because I knew what the option would be.
Hmm. So, okay, so when you meet Jam Master Jenny's, they're teaching you these things. Um, did you have a genre of music that you thought that, okay, hip hop, I can do this, or did you think about the R&B side of it?
No, I just bought what I did to the party. They wanted what I did, whatever with the sound that I had. That's what they wanted, because Namdi at that time, Teddy Riley had changed the sound of music. Everything was swinging. Everything was New Jack swing. So even Run DMC for for a small for a minute, right? For a New York minute, went the R&B route, where they were kind of doing music that kind of fit the mold of the New Jack vibe, but it really wasn't a thing. But they tried it, and I brought that sound to their sound, and it worked a little bit and it did well. But that's what got me in the door, because I was able to create music that was relevant at that moment.
Okay, so for those of us who went in America in New York during the time when Teddy came out, can you explain what it was like when when he did I Wanna, or was it when he was doing stuff for Kumo D, or when did you say he brought his sound that everyone like, wow, what is this?
To me, Johnny Kemp just got paid Friday
Oh,
night. There's so many Teddy Riley hits. It would take us all day to go through his catalog. But once you heard them drums and you heard that swing, it changed the sound, and everybody started looking that way, and that just became what was happening. And if you could emulate that a little bit, perhaps, then you were working. But if you couldn't swing, you just didn't work in that era, because that was the dominating sound.
my goodness, how does it? And he was Babyface just turned 64, and Teddy's about 54. Yeah, and Babyface said in an interview a year or two ago that when they heard I Want It, that he in LA said, man, what is this? That we need to change our sound. And so you start thinking of Teddy being, 20, 21, or 19 or so, changing an entire sound. That doesn't seem to happen. I don't know who's doing it, which kid is doing that now, but did
No,
you look and see? Yeah.
he was the architect. Teddy Riley single-handedly was the architect of, he dominated a whole era. Definitely.
So as a young up and coming musician, producer stuff, who were you looking at to think, this is who I want to be like as a producer? Was it Jimmy and Terry, LA and Babyface? Was it Quincy Jones or Mutu? I mean,
it was definitely Teddy Riley and Quincy Jones, hands down. Those two were my, that was the goals for me. You know what I'm saying? Those were the guys that I aspired to be, that I looked up to and I studied. But unfortunately, Namdi, I was able to sit in studios with Teddy many nights. He would allow me he was at Soundtrack Studios or whatever studio he was working at during the time. I was in the rooms, and even at his apartment sometime. I would go and watch him work, and
in St.
he was
Nick's.
just no, there wasn't, not even in St. Nick's, after he had moved
Okay,
up
I think
up in the Upper West Side,
okay,
on a West Side Highway, because we used to race our cars on the West Side Highway, just doing what crazy kids do. But I had the opportunity of watching him work, and that is what inspired me to do what I do.
When did you first meet him?
Oh my God. It had to be in the 80s, because Aaron Hall, this is another part, right? Aaron Hall, the lead singer, was in a choir that I started with my friend and brother, Bishop Hezekiah Walker.
What? Oh,
we
how?
had a gospel choir. Yeah, we had a gospel choir, Hezekiah Walker and Love Fellowship. Aaron Hall, the lead singer of Guy,
Yeah.
was one of the lead singers in the choir.
Wow.
So Aaron connected me with Teddy.
Okay.
That's how the whole thing came about.
Wow. So did you had Groove Me come out by the time you recognize Aaron has already made it? Or
I was there, absolutely, yes.
oh, you'd already met them
Yes.
before Groove Me came out?
No, I knew Aaron and Teddy, right? They were working on the record before Groove Me came out.
Okay. Did you get to meet Timmy?
I know Timmy, yes. Timmy Gatlin, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Oh, so when you heard
Yes.
Groove Me, what was your initial thoughts?
I mean, it was crazy. I mean, I remember Groove Me like I remember hearing Remember the Time for the first time when Teddy did Michael. Them drums and that swing. Oh my God. I was like, this guy is brilliant. And it just shifted the sound of Black music 100%, hands down. It shifted the sound.
When I interviewed Timmy Gatlin, he said that Teddy called him and says, "Hey, come to the house I've just got a sound." And he got to the house and he had all these kids and people in the house, and Teddy was just playing Groove Me. And he says, "Come on, write the lyrics." And he just, wrote the lyrics just, within, 10, 15 minutes. But he said the sound was just so funky, it was so hot that he just wrote the lyrics. And it's like, to think that you can just create, and I don't know if we've ever given him justice as a kid in your room with no money, being able to generate those type of sounds and stuff.
Yeah, it's I mean, what Teddy has done will forever be in, in the history books. I mean, you can't talk about R&B in a whole era and Teddy not be the poster child. 100%.
Yeah. So you meet up with him and stuff. When is this? Then you go and work with Run DMC, or was it before?
No, that was before. Or around the same time. To be honest, Namdi, it's really happened around the same time, because after Groove Me blew up and Guy blew up, I started getting opportunities because the records on Run DMC was blowing up. And then from there, I was working on Salt-N-Pepa records and Chubb Rock, all the hip hop artists I was working with. And then in one of the sessions, it was a Chubb Rock session, I was playing keyboards for Howie T, who's producing this amazing hit Chubb Rock did called Treat 'Em Right.
Yeah.
I was playing keyboards on that record.
Are you kidding
Another
me?
producer, the saxophone solo on that record, that's me playing, right? Wow. Right, and some keys and stuff. So, there were always other producers sitting in the rooms. There was another producer, Dr. Freeze and Spider-Man, who was just hanging out. And they invited me to a session to participate and play keys because we just started working together. They were writing a song and producing a song called I Want to Sex You Up.
Oh, yes.
That ended up on that Color Me Bad, right? And that ended up on the New Jack City soundtrack. Well, I was in that session playing keyboards, and the manager, Hiram Hicks, at the time, who was managing Dr. Freeze and Spider-Man, took a liking and an interest to me and gave me an opportunity to create some music and produce something. And that's when I went in the studio and recorded a song called I'm Dreamin' that ended up being given to Christopher Williams.
Okay.
And that song ended up on the New Jack City soundtrack as well.
Wow. So at this time I was in Nigeria, and so when I tell my guests is sometimes when you guys things blow up in America, you don't realize that it goes across the world. So Treat 'Em was a massive record in Nigeria, but also that New Jack City soundtrack, and Chubb Rock was actually he had a very distinct style of rapping, almost like he was reciting an encyclopedia kind of thing.
Yes. Chubb Rock was also a brilliant mind as well. Really, really, really intelligent, really just amazing, just smart.
So, because you mentioned you were a musician, how did you transition to the actual? Because most of us used to think that all these records, they're a whole band in a studio playing it, and the guys are singing over a microphone. We realized that actually all this stuff is programmed. So how did you transition from playing your keys and drums to actually, I need to learn how to program what I'm doing, or how did it work for you in those early days?
Well, in those days, we didn't really have the Pro Tools and everything that we have now, Logic and all of that software. So I actually play all my instruments, or actually play all my parts. So
Oh.
if a song was, back in those days, songs were 5 minutes, 4 minutes, and whatever, like they were just long. Um, if I was playing a keyboard part, Namdi, I played the actual part for 5 minutes, right? I will play the piano part for 5 minutes from the beginning to the end. If there was some string parts, I will play the string parts for the whole five. If there was a bass line, I will play the bass line all the way through, as opposed to cutting and paste. And the things that we have now to kind of speed up the process. I actually enjoy playing it all the way through because it was the little nuances
Mm.
that made the song feel something different, and feel a little bit different. So every now and then there was a different type of movement. The eight bars wasn't always the same as the previous 8 bars, you know what I mean? So it was like little changes and little notes. So I enjoyed that part. But now, thank God, I have a bunch of engineers and young producers around me who can help me speed up the process, so I
No,
don't have to.
no, we missed the old school way of doing it. Music is not the same. I mean, yeah, we missed.
No, I still do it that way. I still prefer playing the songs and touching knobs and EQ things. I'm old school, man.
Okay. Now, a lot of my guests keep saying when you interview producers, find out what MPC. Were you using any MPC? What back in those Chubb Rock and Chris Williams days?
Back in those days, we used the SP1200 a lot. The SP12 back in those days. I got into the MPC because of Teddy. Teddy Riley was rocking the MPC. So I started working the MPC after watching Teddy Riley. And then later on, Rodney Jerkins, Darkchild, you know, would invite me to his house and give me MPCs with amazing drum sounds that were life changing. So, I still use the MPC. We have the new ones now. But for me, the formula is the same and that formula works for me. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely the MPC is my favorite still to this day.
Okay. As I said, I am the least technical producer, so I have no idea anything you've just said. But I know that the people who are going to be like, "Oh, he's the SB what?" Okay, now I'm
Yes.
thinking, okay,
And the MPC 3000 in particular. Yes.
okay.
Yes.
But who taught you how to move from, you playing instruments to? So is it Teddy that was saying, "Okay, you best do this when you're producing. You can play your sounds into it," or how did you shift from that to know that, wow, this is how we actually make music actually is through these devices as opposed to playing a band in a studio?
Well, just watching, because in those days we actually did play everything. If you wanted somebody to play you wanted a bass part, you called in a bass player. If you
Oh,
wanted a guitar player, you called in a guitar player. Now, they have Splice and all these other programs that you can just, drag and drop and blah, blah,
ah,
blah. But even now, for me, if I want a certain feel, I'm
mm,
going to still call an instrumentalist over. I'm going to call a
okay.
guitar player, a bass player, and then we're going to create it. But I learned so much from Teddy Riley, Jam Master Jay, Herbie Lovebug,
Oh
Herbie
yeah, Herbie.
Azar, who was the producer for Kid and Play and Salt-N-Pepa, and so many other artists. I had the privilege of sitting around these genius producers, and I just learned different styles from each and every one of them.
What did you do with Salt-N-Pepa? Did you do any tracks that we would have?
Yes, I wrote on some songs musically. Express Yourself was Salt. She produced it. Yeah.
Oh,
And
with
Jackie McGee
Jack.
was the vocalist. Yep, Jackie
Okay,
McGee. Yep.
okay. Yes, Jackie, because I did interview Jackie, and she said yes.
Yeah,
Yourself and the two of you came in to shift things around. Okay.
yeah. Yeah, that was an amazing day. That was a great session. It was
Oh,
amazing.
so then when Salt is producing, how what was I mean? Because now it is very interesting that you said this, and I know that Timbaland has said it recently about there's a difference between a beat maker and a producer. So you said that Salt was producing. What was the difference between what you brought to the table and what she did as the producer on that track?
Well, she had the overall vision. She knew what she wanted. She knew what she wanted to sound like. She necessarily couldn't sit at the keyboard and play it, but she would give me space, and creative freedom to come up with progressions, and she would determine if she liked it or not. If it made sense, she loved it, and then she would lock that in. But she, overall, as a producer, can see exactly where she was going and how she wanted to put it all together.
And so that doesn't necessarily mean that she needed to know how to play the drums. She didn't have to.
No, not at all. But she knew how to find her beats and what samples she wanted to use. So when it came to beats and rhythms and samples, like she was a mastermind of putting that together. But if she needed me to play some piano transitions or whatever, then I would add that to the I would bring that to the table, and then she would use it, as she will.
So for you to, as you said that, so you were able to then distinguish between when, because some people would say, no, you would have said, well, I produced the track, I played all the stuff, she just did, and that's some of the things they label with Puffy. But I think we've learned to appreciate the fact that the producer has a vision, like a Quincy Jones. He brings in all these instrumentals to come and play the different elements of the dangerous, or the bad album, or the thrill album, or Off the Wall, but he won't necessarily play to himself.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, so that conversation can be interesting and tricky. But for me, I always knew my assignment, and then if I came up with arrangements, then they would give me writer's credits on those records. So it worked out. It was always a fair situation.
Okay,
at least from my experience.
From your experience. Now, saying that, before we move on, I mean, as on maybe on the side of being a producer as opposed to being a recording artist, how did you learn about the industry, the business side, the publishing, and all that side? Who sort of taught you, and it made you sure that you understood not just writer's credit, but making sure that you were getting what you were owed?
Oh, I learned that a little bit too late. Right?
Oh, Lord have mercy.
Life got better. Let's just say, Namdi, life got better later on, right? But as a young kid coming in a game, I didn't know as much as I know now. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand publishing, and I just wanted to be in the studio making records, and I was getting those advances and not understanding what it meant to recoup and cross collateralizations and all of those other terms. You know what I mean? But eventually, I figured it out, and I will say, Namdi, I've been blessed enough to remain relevant and to have longevity where I can honestly say life made up for what I didn't know early on.
Yeah.
Now, everyone doesn't have, can't say that, and it's the horror stories, but I honestly can say that I stayed in the game long enough to fix things and to correct things and to make it right.
Yeah, I mean, it is. After doing over 100 interviews, it's been the worst type of thing to hear. And I think the only two people who have said that they knew what they were doing was Joyce Sims. I interviewed her 2 months before she died, and she sort of read the book on how to make in the music industry. So when they try to take stuff out of her stuff, she said, whoa, I've read this. And so she kept her stuff. Jay King, because he knew everything, so he was really hard on everyone. So but then also Take Six, they got signed to in Nashville, and they were offered a contract that country music artists sign, and which was pretty much like, yeah, here, go get your lawyer, make sure they read everything and stuff. So they were taken care of. So, but anyone else, it unfortunately they did the same. Carl West said the same thing. It's when you're making so much money early on that you don't recognize that there's so much more that you weren't getting, and that seems to be a shame for our Black artists in our community, where we're just taking from ourselves and really stifling our own talent. Any
Yeah.
thoughts as to why coming into the game and looking back as to why people aren't as willing to help? Like, okay, well, I'll get you in, but I'm gonna, but I also want to teach you. Eddie F is the one person that everyone really says, here's all the stuff. Make sure you take care of this stuff. But very few are like that. Oh, okay. Who else was there? Queen Latifah's mum was like that with KG. They said they taught them everything to make sure that they got their stuff. But any ideas of why you think within the industry that black artists don't seem to look out for their own?
Because people are greedy. That's all. And they don't always have integrity. So I just think that is a disservice to our community. Because I think we have a responsibility to teach, and to look out for each other more and to generate wealth within our community. So I just think we have to do better with protecting each other, and educating, and it's also important that, the Bible says that, we perish for the lack of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes we have to, sometimes you get what you know, or you don't get, you know what I'm saying? So you have to read, you have to ask the questions, because you got to understand, when you taking kids out of urban communities and you putting them in situations where they can move their moms out of the projects tomorrow. You know what I mean? They're going to go for that $1 million carrot that's being flashed in front of their eyes, and without understanding the cost of that carrot.
Yeah.
At the end of the day. So we have to do better by mentoring and sharing the information, and just making sure we protect each other.
Yeah. You mentioned Hiram Hicks, and most of us would remember him from his role with New Edition,
Yes.
and stuff. How so? What at the time we found you? What was his role? What was he doing? And then that he decided to bring you on board.
What Hiram was meant, when I first learned of Hiram Hicks, I know he was doing the New Edition, BBD, all of that kind of stuff, and like I said, he was managing the
Dr. Freeze and Spider-Man.
Right, Freeze and Spider-Man, and then he took me on and started managing my career, and as he grew in the business, he made sure that he created opportunities, and he would send the elevator back down, as I often say.
Wow.
So when Hiram became the president of Island Black Music, he gave me my first A&R job.
Okay.
And taught me the game and the business and how to maneuver and how to work things out. And so, yeah.
Is that when the penny dropped, when you thought, oh, so this is publishing an advance in perpetuity?
Absolutely. Because he was creating opportunities and giving me production deals. And back in those days, Namdi, we talking about 6-figure production deals, and I've never seen that kind of money in my life. But he would explain how it would work and why I would need to do such and such and such, and what it really meant in long term. So he was definitely an amazing advisor and a mentor, even to this day.
Wow. So being okay, before we get to why you'd shift from being a producer to going on the other side, which is the business side, talk about I'm Dreaming, because that's as New Jack as you can, and one of my favorite male singers, and he knows this, is Christopher Williams. All I See is one of my top 5 songs, but so I'm not going to play around with that. In fact, Horace said he co-wrote it and sang a background to it. But I'm Dreaming. I mean, we all love New Jack City. It was a massive breakthrough album, film. But how did you come up with the I'm Dreaming?
Well, Hiram gave me an opportunity to go in his studio, to create something. So I called a friend from the church, Mark Middleton, to come in. Mark Middleton, who's the voice of Black.
Oh yeah, I met with them. Yeah, and he was always singing when I met with. Yeah. Oh, yeah,
that's my guy. We
he goes back that
we
far.
worked.
Wow.
Yeah, we were in the same church. You know, we worked at the same church at the time when we were kids. And I would have all the guys, Mark Middleton, Josiah Spellman, like guys would just come in and sing the hooks. And we recorded the idea. We gave it to Hiram. Hiram met with Cassandra Mills, who I
Okay.
think was at Giant
Giant.
Record.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she loved the song and connected the song with Christopher Williams, and it was a hit.
So when you first met Christopher, and because he has such a, he's, I don't know, Teddy Pendergrass, Barry White, all moved
Yeah.
in. I mean, what was it like getting him in the studio and just trying to get him to turn he's like a Ferrari to help him to be able to balance the song?
Well, one, it was a little intimidating. One, because it was like my first big
Oh,
opportunity as a
oh,
producer,
wow.
right?
That's your first
And
track. Wow.
that was like my first song that I produced, like the
Wow.
very, very first that I produced by myself,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And Christopher already has this big personality. You know what I mean? He's a gentleman, but Christopher can, he's Christopher. He can be intimidating because he's
Yeah.
quiet. He's not saying much, But after we got through that, we connected, and then I would come up with ideas on how I wanted him to execute the song, and he would just do it, and we've been tied to the hip since then.
Was Aaron Hall around when you were doing I'm Dreaming?
Aaron Hall, no, because Aaron Hall and them was gone. They was out with Guy. Guy was blowing up everything, so they were on the road doing Guy. But Aaron he was around for
Oh,
sure.
okay. I think. Oh, okay. No, I thought I saw Christopher
Because you gotta
talk.
understand, because Guy was on the soundtrack as well.
Yes, 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 yes. So New Jack Swing, New Jack City. Okay.
Yep.
No, I was wondering if because Christopher mentioned that he was recording a track. I thought it was I'm Dreaming. That Aaron just said, try and sing it like you're doing a Michael Jackson type of stuff.
That's
So
the song.
that's
That's
what.
the
Okay.
song.
So that's what I
Yes,
was wondering. Was
absolutely. Yes. Now that yes.
okay.
Yes. Yes.
Was he in the studio set record? Or how did
In the
he?
studio.
Oh,
Yes.
Aaron was there.
Yeah. Because it was one like my first opportunity. So all the homies, all the brothers would just come in, cheering me on, and just so proud because I remember when Dreamin went #1, the excitement and that Aaron had, and he was just so proud. And Teddy, all the guys, they were just really, really happy that I got that opportunity.
Wow. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, with yeah, it's. So did it surprise you that it did get to #1? Was you surprised that it they even shot a video for it that they was like, yeah, we're gonna push it out?
I was sitting home back in those days when they had video music box and all of
Yeah,
that kind of stuff, right?
yeah.
Something was happening, and I remember sitting on a couch and watching the video come on for the first time. I remember driving down 6th Avenue in the Village on West 3rd Street when the song came on the radio. I remember everything about that song when I heard it or saw it for the first time. And it was just unbelievable to have a #1 song like on the charts. I
On your
mean, to
first
be
go.
#1 on the first go around, but to be #1 in the whole country, like I don't care if it was for one day. You gotta say, like, one day I was #1 in the whole world.
Wow. And it's a timeless track. Is it's fitting for your record label, timeless music.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Wow. So what did you do next after I'm Dreaming?
After I'm Dreaming blew up, man, I was getting work. I started doing Charlie Wilson, Keith Sweat, Bobby Brown. I mean, you name it. It was just coming. It would not stop.
What did you do
I
with
just
Bobby?
I did a song on a Bobby project. It was a remix record called
Okay.
Songs in the Key of B. I did a
Okay.
song called I Want You, I Need You. Bobby Brown recorded.
Oh,
And
okay, okay.
yeah, so I did that song, and then Big Bub, and Today, I did a song with them. So I was working a lot,
Oh,
a whole lot.
my goodness. Okay, and if we skip back, because you did remind us that your first sort of concert was with Guy. how did that come about? How did that come around that you got selected to tour with them?
Because we were hanging out. Aaron, they were inviting me to the studio when Teddy, watching the guys work. And then the tours came about, the opportunities. And being that I was there, I was in the room, I was there. They just said, come on and play keyboards. And Bernard Bell brought me in, and he was the MD, Bernard Bell.
Okay.
Rest in peace, Bernard. He brought me in because he was the musical director, and that's how I got the keyboard opportunity.
Did you meet with me and Gene Griffin?
I knew Gene. Yes, I knew Gene Griffin and Frank and all the guys. Yeah, I was there.
Was he as intimidating as everyone tells me when from
Well, you know what? Gene was a big, uh, physically fit guy. Just with a bald head and a mustache. Who his appearance was intimidating, but to me, he was always a gentleman.
Mm.
Always a gentleman. I've never had any issues with Gene at all. He was always a kind gentleman to me.
Yeah. No, I mean, Damien even talks. I mean, Timmy, I just spoke to him last week, and he talked about how, as much as, the fallout with him leaving, they always say that Gene was like the most impeccably dressed person with diamonds, and he looked like
sharp all the time. All the time. He was sharp.
Wow.
Well dressed all the time. And I don't have the horror stories because I never had to deal with them
Yeah.
On that business level. I was just my only dealings where I was the keyboard player for the guy for a period of time. So I really never had any other dealings with him. But my interactions were always kind.
Now, Sprague Doogie, I don't know if you know Sprague.
Yes.
Yeah. He said that Gene would make sure that they're rehearsing so that they would be on the top. I mean, because Guy used to put on a show to compete with No Audition, but do you remember any of the rehearsals and how the shows were?
Yeah, I mean, well, Teddy was he was really driven in excellence. Everything he did, he did it at a high level of excellence. So the rehearsals were always tight. Like, we took everything very seriously. It was just a no nonsense environment. We came there to do the work, and if you were going to be a part, then you had to put in the work and do your part. So yeah, they definitely took the opportunities seriously. It wasn't a game.
We only the Superfest, the any New Edition guy. Did you go on that tour?
No, I left at that point because I started doing more work, more production. So I started on the earlier parts of the tours, and then I kind of went out to make records.
Do you think if Teddy wasn't a member of Guy, that he would have been an even greater producer, just being and have a bigger body of work if he hadn't had to go on tour and do all that stuff? Or do you think he didn't make much of a difference?
No, I think he did both, and he did it well. Like, Teddy was a producer, he was an artist, and he made everybody else wanna become that. Like, because of the Teddies, there was Stanley Browns and Devontae Swings and so many others. We can go on. Eddie F., who you have to bring into the conversation. You know what I mean? Who was killing it in that era as well. Yeah. So there was so many people, and it almost kind of felt like we all came from that same tree. You know what I mean? We would just, leaves or branches on a deeply rooted tree of New Jack Swing, and it worked for everybody. Everybody was able to have their own identity, but that we came from that tree, from that cloth.
So when did you just Moon Harum gave you your first A&R gig? Did you think, why did you decide to take that and not continue just being in the studio?
Well, I did continue to be in
Okay.
the studio. So I was the A&R slash producer guy. Because at that time, Hiram signed Dru Hill.
Oh, so you know Woody. Okay.
Yeah, I know Woody well. And I produced Tell Me.
You're kidding me. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, wait a minute now. Okay, now, okay. So Woody's almost like could we do a different podcast together? And so this is yes, Hiram Hicks who um Dave Hollister was supposed to sing it, right?
Dave Hollister was supposed to sing it first.
Oh yeah. So Woody
And
was
Dave
telling me that.
Hollister and Dave Hollister did an amazing job. Like he bodied that song, right? But what happened was Dru Hill was a potential signing for Island Records. And there was a soundtrack, Eddie, was the movie called Eddie, which Whoopi Goldberg, right?
Yeah.
Starred in Eddie, the basketball movie. And they needed a song. They wanted to place the song in the soundtrack. And Dru Hill, this was a great way to launch the
Ah.
group. So they gave the song to Dru Hill. But Dave had already recorded the song. It was mixed and mastered. And he
Wow.
did. And like you wouldn't have been mad at his version because it would have been a hit. It would have probably had the same results. But that's what happened. And that's why the switch happened, because they wanted to sign Dave, but I don't think they were able to come to terms. So they went another way. So that's what happened.
Yeah, so Woody said that when they were singing their demo in the studio, the Hiram that was singing "Tell Me," and then he was almost looking at them and thinking, "Oh, tell me." And then that night he had them go record it. Were you in the studio with them?
I was in the studio. We were actually mastering Dave's version. We were actually at a mastering session when we got the phone call that the group was in town and they wanted to meet with Hiram. And the group came over to the studio. This is a true story. The group came over to the studio. We saw the group perform, and Hiram was like, "Yo, you got to take this group in the studio and record the song." And that's what happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
What did you make of them? Did you think they're like a version of Jodeci, or what was your thoughts about the four of them when you first saw them?
To be considered or compared to Jodeci in that era is the most incredible compliment, because Jodeci were killing it. Like Andre Harrell and all those guys over at Uptown, they were killing it. Jodeci became the sound. Like it was the new blueprint. So you had a group who could sound that way. But Dru Hill had their own thing too. You know what I'm saying? But it was almost, the sound was identifiable and familiar. And Cisco was Michael Jackson. You know what I'm saying? Cisco just had a thing. And then you had Jazz, who was a quiet storm, and Woody, you know what I'm saying? But then you had Nokia, who was a silent killer, who I don't think ever got enough props when it comes to his ability to produce and write, because Nokia was brilliant as well. So they had everything. They had it. And they proved it later on, because it just kept moving and it kept moving and it blew up. But when they walked in that building, you knew immediately that they were next.
When the song blows up, what's your how do you take it compared to "I'm Dreaming"? I guess it's not that nothing can replicate the first success, but what was that like when that "Tell Me"?
Man, I was happy. I was really happy. But to be honest, I was really happy for the guys. To see guys come out of Baltimore, Maryland, and with hopes and dreams of becoming something in this industry. And I remember when we were recording the song, I think at Unique Studios or Quad Studios at the time, we would take breaks and go to McDonald's and have to wait online in Times Square, and we wait in a half hour to get a cheeseburger. that record came out and we went back to that same McDonald's a month later, man, it was crazy.
Oh,
You know, they was superstars.
wow. Goodness. But then how were you juggling um producing then A&R? So what was your role as an A&R then?
Signing artists, looking for amazing writers. I had an opportunity to introduce a gospel division to Island Black Music.
Oh,
They let me sign. They gave me a little imprint, which was SBM at the time, Stan Brown Music.
wow.
So they gave me a partnership. I was then able to sign Karen Clark Sheard to her first solo album.
Wow.
I was able to sign Bishop T.D. Jakes to his first solo album
Wow.
deal. So partnered with my guy Donald Lawrence. So it was amazing. So I was an executive by day, producer by night.
Is it by this time that you'd really learned about everything? So you learned.
Yes. 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 I was okay by then.
Oh, were you able to write were they able to go back since you know that all the stuff and you're on the other side now, are they would say, okay, yeah, we'll shift things around and give you back some of your stuff, or does that gone and you'll have to move forward?
No, from that point, I was the deals, the bulk of the bad deals were happening in the earlier hip hop stages when I was playing keyboards and I should have gotten some publishing for creating whatever and didn't get it. But it was okay because for me, it got me to the next room.
Yeah.
You know, so how I look at it is I didn't always get, what was fair,
Yeah.
but it gave me opportunities
Yeah.
to go on to the next. And so when I got in the next room, I was a little smarter than I was in the previous. So it worked out.
When I interviewed Rodney, I asked him about most of us know him for his faith. But a lot of us understand that the music industry and entertainment industry has a very dark side. How were you able to, maneuver as a Christian in those early days within this industry and all the temptations and distractions that could come along with it?
Because I never had to stop one thing to do another, right? I was always committed to my church. I was always at the Wednesday night, the midweek service.
Wow.
Prayer. I was always at the Friday night service. I was always at church all day on Sundays. So I never shifted my faith or got so caught up in the industry where I was no longer connected to my spirituality. And it was being in church and still serving on my instrument at the church that kept me balanced. And even to this day, when you talk about Rodney, Darkchild, these are the conversations that we have on a regular. We talk more about our conversations are more faith driven than they are production driven. So my point is, when you have people around you, especially in this industry, who are working on both sides, who understand both sides, and we keep each other in check, where you don't become where you can be in it and not of it. You understand? It's important to have people that you can talk to, and when just kind of keep you straight and keep you centered.
So you were still, even when you had I'm Dreamin', you were still going back to church on a Sunday?
Every Sunday. Never missed a Sunday.
Wow.
Never.
My goodness. I mean, that's dedication. And I'm saying that dedication, just knowing how everything can be thrown at you, and almost as if there's a sense of if we bring him down, that's we've got him. And so there's either relying on God's protection and not being not just tempted, but been really distracted. So it must be a really hard thing. So how did you keep your studio sort of um, in a sanctified way where temptations weren't thrown in there to distract you while you're making your music and you know because you know artists can be known for you know saying this is how I work creatively and then producers like well anything goes.
Well, for me in my studio, it's always been understood without even being spoken, you know, verbally or expressed verbally, what my stance would be on certain things, and how I preferred my environment to be and
Mm.
what I wanted my environment to feel like. So if it was always understood, and if there was a problem, um guys who I work with were respectful enough to just go to another facility. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah,
would avoid all of that because it's just me, and not to pass judgment or say anybody, you know, or to condemn anyone for their actions. I just know what works for me.
yeah.
So I just, you know, I choose to have my environment the way I have my environment. So it's always worked out. Always.
So
There's never been a problem.
because you'd already laid the sort of marker, so people like Rodney says, people knew his background, his faith, so they knew
Yes.
not to cross the line, so they respected that. It's almost for the ones who are afraid to stand for their faith, they seem to be the ones who have to compromise, and then it seems to be the ones who sort of fall apart.
Right. And to be honest with you, Namdi, a lot of that I've watched and I've learned from Rodney, watching how he moved in his facilities and watching him work with artists from the biggest to the smallest and how he navigated those relationships and what the environment felt like. So that was kind of my inspiration as well.
Yeah, no, it must be good. What about when you were watching Rodney? I mean, another Teddy protege, um, all of a sudden, just you know, from just become a create his own sound. How was that like watching him? But you, he must be younger than and then younger than everyone else coming through. What was your thoughts?
Rodney came through like a Mack truck and just started knocking everything down. You know what I mean? Um, and I think the vibe and the feel early on had that, but we were kind of swinging. But Rodney was just coming just on the straight up with a whole nother pounce. You know, it was just different. Like them drums and the way Rodney was doing vocals with Shiz, LaShawn Daniels, and they just took it. Then it became the Dark Child era.
Mm,
You know, if the truth be told, there was a time when it became when Rodney, even to this day, you know what I mean, was the blueprint. And still, you know, every now and then here he come again, dominating the charts
yeah,
forever.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah.
so he never stops. And so, but when it comes to, I learned so much from RJ because when it comes to sonics and stuff, like
Mm,
he gets it on a whole nother level.
yeah. You mentioned that you helped create the gospel division at Island. And from some artists that I've worked interviewed, those who were signed to majors, then they actually went and did gospel. One of the things they said is actually the gospel side of the recording industry actually was probably a lot darker than the urban side because it's they there was a lot of hypocrisy with some of the artists that they felt. I don't know how it was like. You know, it's one thing recording the music, but then do you have a sense of making sure that they're living what they're saying, the artists?
Well, I don't. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position where I had to police people's lifestyles. I was just hired to produce a record.
Mm,
So I've only had to interact with artists when we were in the recording process. You know,
mm.
I didn't have to follow them home. I didn't have to go out and hang out and have dinner. You know, I did the record
Mm,
and gave it to the record company, and then they did what they do. So you know, there's stories about gospel artists, just like there's stories about hip hop or R&B artists. You know, nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
But you know, I can't really say that I've had any issues or bad experiences.
Mm.
Because I do my job, I go home, they go home, it's all good.
Yeah. So one of the things that one of the things that because there was a time I worked at Edmunds Entertainment where briefly when I was in LA, and I remember that I was contemplating, you know, the looked at the gospel side of music, and I thought that the message was always, in fact, as I put my kids to bed, they read the gospel where it says, the healthy don't need a doctor, just the sick. But then it was like, well, how do you get the message to those who don't know the gospel if you're just singing gospel music? And it seems like, when we said earlier that some churches think, oh, you're working in the secular industry, we're cutting you off. Mm-hmm. Did you ever think about, okay, if I'm making music, I wanted to reach everybody, but hopefully somebody will pick something inspirational from what I'm creating. I don't necessarily need to put in biblical Jesus and God and all this just to become an effective Christian record, but I can make a message, a record about love and redemption and forgiveness, but which might come across, which will play on all the stations, but might have a different impact on whoever's listening. Was that ever in the reckoning, or were you one of those that thought, yep, if I'm doing a gospel album, this is what God's work, and so I'm dreaming, this is just to hone my career, my craft?
Yeah, my work, my occupation in regards to music has been just that. If I'm doing a secular song, it's for the industry. I want to just make sure it's written well with the best artists, and with hopes that the record company and the executives would get behind it. That's the business side of the music, right? But there's some, even working on the secular side, Namdi, I'm only going to go but so far lyrically. You know what I mean? Because it's just how I feel about it personally, my personal convictions. So when I'm doing gospel music, there's styles, right? And then there's hymns and spiritual hymns and psalms. So if I'm doing something mainstream that I feel is a faith-based driven record that I do want to resonate beyond the four walls of the church, like the single God is Good, right? Whether you in Japan, whether you in Australia, whether you smoking a blunt on a corner in front of the projects in Brooklyn, if you say to someone, God is good, right? More than likely, they're going to say what? All the time, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to put something out there that everybody, whether you were a Christian, a believer, a non-believer, whatever, when you heard the song, you had to say, you know what? Even on a bad day, God is good. Regardless to what you're dealing with, who you are, what walk of life, the fact remains that we're still here, we're blessed, and God is good. So you have to know how to balance it out and how to work on both sides.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because, as I said, I'm a therapist and I work with in the National Health Service. But as a Christian, I don't then only say, well, you're not a Christian, I can't see you. And so I do wonder, and so that's one of my limitations about with the music industry. There was very much of either you're a gospel artist or you're a secular artist. And I'm thinking, well, why can't we have Christian artists or producers and writers be able to write songs and produce songs that the pop or hip hop and stuff, but being very having redemption in the lyrics.
Yes.
You don't have to use the name. You could talk about the greatest love could be Christ. I'm just thinking that there's so many opportunities, but we tend to have to say no. If I have to say that, I need to put God in there, because if I don't put God in there, it doesn't, it defeats the purpose. And I'm thinking, no, the Book of Esther didn't mention God once, but it's still a powerful story about faithfulness and about courage and faith and redemption. But God is not mentioned once in the book. And so That's my sort of my gripe with the gospel art, with Christians in music,
Yeah.
whether they stand in faith and are able to, just to let the Holy Spirit just come up and create a song and stuff.
I agree with you 100%. Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Okay. So you're an A&R at Island. Then what? We're getting towards the latter part of the 90s into 2000s. Music is shifting now. All your Brooklyn natives are all coming up and dominating. From Jay-Z and stuff. What are you doing as a producer to see? Wow, making sure you're still relevant as a producer in R&B when hip hop now is becoming the dominant sound.
Well, at that time when that started to shift, I was now A&R at Motown. I was a senior director of A&R at Motown under Kedar Massenberg, who was the president of Motown at the time.
Oh, Mr. Neo Soul, man.
Yes, he is the god of neo soul. Absolutely, Kedar Massenberg. He changed the game. So Kedar hired me, gave me an opportunity. So then I'm over there working as an A&R. I'm working on Will Downing records, The Temptations. We working with Stevie Wonder. It's just an amazing thing, man. So I went from one side to the next, where I did more work on the executive side. And then I did produce some songs. I produced the Temptations album that won a Grammy that year. So it was always a good, the journey has always been amazing.
Were you there when what's the name of the Profile?
Yes, absolutely. I was there when they signed Profile.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, but you didn't. So when you were there as an exec, you're not working you're not supporting them. You're not doing production.
Not on that particular project. I think while Profile was there, I was there working on. I was doing the Temptations album at the time.
Okay. So you were there during either Chico DeBarge as well.
Absolutely, Chico. That's my friend. That's my brother.
Okay. So what was the difference going from Ireland to Motown? Because there was a different sort of management style and sort of expectations.
No, I produced a lot more at Island Records, at Island Black Music. I kind of lived more on the production side. On at Motown, I kind of stayed more in the A&R executive lane.
So what's the difference between the executive? What did you bring differently compared to being in the studio? Did you think you brought to the artist?
No, I just honored the assignment that was given to me. So Kedar wanted me to find songs and writers for the artist. So if the assignment and the goal was we need you to bring us some writers and producers, then that's where my focus went.
Wow, that's how I would think. It's like, well, why don't you go produce the whole album? You're producer.
No, well, not the whole album, but he did give me opportunities to produce on some of the records, in which I did. Like I wrote on Will Downing's album. I wrote on the Temptations. I was working with India Arie because she was newly signed there at the time.
Yeah.
So I did get an opportunity to go in the studio and cut records with a lot of those artists.
Okay. So when Kedar moves on from Motown, what happens after time at Motown? What did you move on to do after that?
I started working for a company called JSM. JSM was a advertisement music production house where they just did commercials, just jingles and television commercials. And I met the owner and they gave me an opportunity. And I went to work for them mainly because he gave me a studio, right? He gave me space in this amazing facility to have my own studio. So for me, that was the selling point. I was now able to write commercials, do jingles, and have a studio 24/7. I wasn't going to turn that down.
Oh, so people might think, well, you left the industry to do. So what did you learn by making that switch?
It's definitely a different creative process. Scoring television commercials and jingles. It requires a different type of creativity. But I've always wanted to get in that industry, and I knew that was a hard industry to really get in. So once I found favor with the owner and he gave me the opportunity, I decided I wanted to explore it.
How long did you do that for?
I did that for about 3 years.
Wow. Any famous commercials that people might
A lot. Walmart, Subway, uh, Piggly Wiggly, if you live in the South. Um,
Piggly Wiggly. I went to
uh,
college in Alabama. Yeah, I know Piggly
uh,
Wiggly.
right. Every kiss begins with K. That's the theme. It's a whole bunch of stuff.
Wow. After 3 years, what happens? Did he give you? Did he just give you a studio, or you used his a studio
No, he had space. He had empty room. He had rooms. He just had space that was available. So I put all my gear, and they already had gear. The rooms are already built out. So that became my production facility.
But then when you were doing this, were you still producing artists on the side, or just that was 100%
No,
focus?
at that point, it was just really uh writing commercials
Wow.
and just songwriting on the side, just writing for my own personal catalog. But it was mainly doing television scoring.
Then after 3 years, what happens?
After 3 years, I get a call to do a show called Sunday Best,
Was
the
that a
gospel
BT?
show. Yes, on BT. I was the co music director with my friend Paul Morton, PJ Morton.
Oh,
Um, PJ Morton and I and the fellas, Corey Henry, all of us, we were all in a band together and we did Sunday Best. And then after that, I got hired at RCA Inspiration, the gospel division, which was called Verity, formerly known as
oh, I
Verity.
know Verity Records. Yeah.
And then I worked there for 3 years.
Was that being executive or
Yes,
back?
A&R. Yep.
Okay.
hmm
Wow.
Under James Jazzy Jordan. He hired me to work there. So then I just started signing gospel artists.
Now, as the industry started shifting, where everything became digital and stuff, and especially with that role, did how did was the expectations different? I mean, are we looking at streams and for gospel artists, or is it like if you write a song, we get publishing because it's played at different churches, or what was the sort of expectation then?
Well, that really around that time was we still had a little time before the whole streaming game just completely took over. It was still about physical CDs and
Okay.
radio and touring. So we still had time to do host live concerts and sell product at the venue, all of that, the fun stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, doing that was kind of right before things really went into the, digital space.
So when it did go digital and hip hop then becomes the dominating sound, what do you end up doing?
Well, by that time, I'm working for myself, and just producing.
Okay.
And I invested in some studios, and I just started producing records and doing work with E1, the gospel label, and working on Shirley Caesar records. That was a Grammy nominated project as well with Phil Thornton. And so it just kind of spiraled into the next thing, which brings me to where I am today.
So how then did you come up with the concept of having timeless music group? I mean, well, how did the idea pop up after all this time to say, let me set up my own label?
Because of the love for it. I love it. I love breaking artists. I love working with new artists. I love discovering and creating platforms and opportunities for those who potentially have next. So I invested in a facility that I can create with no pressure. I'm not in competition with the labels. I do what I want, the way I want to do it, and we can do it at our own pace. I was fortunate enough to get a partnership with Rock Nation. So they believed in what I was doing. And so we're gonna break this and we're gonna build this building one brick, one song at a time.
So yeah, that did come as a surprise. The partnership with Rock Nation. How did that come about?
You have not, because you asked not. I just asked them, and they said yes. They understood my background, my history, and my desire for what I wanted to do, and how I wanted to do it, and they believed in it, and they gave me the green light.
Was Jay-Z involved with that, or does he get it? Does he?
No, he has a whole team that runs
Say
companies.
wow. So there
Yeah.
was so what does a partnership with, say, Rock Nation in 2023 look like? What is it? What is it sort of, what happens? What's the what
Well,
is
Rock
different from,
Nation,
yeah.
what I love about them is they're really into building a culture, and they shape culture, and they own it. They own a thing, and so they gave me an opportunity to own my thing. So I love the support. I love what they give me in terms as the support that's needed in the belief system. So for me, it was really about the culture and what they stand for. So to me, I just thought it was a great fit for me, because I love what they're about.
So so when you, so what's the first project with the partnership? Is that your solo album,
My
or what?
solo album, which is a compilation, it's a compilation project where I get to work with whomever I want to work with. Some of my favorite gospel artists and some secular artists as well, who have deep roots in gospel music, who just wanted to kind of lend their support and sing a gospel song, or just do something different for a minute. So it's really, really working. The first single, God is Good, with Karen Clark shared, Kiera shared, Kelly, and my brother Hezekiah Walker. Um, Rodney Jerkins touched the record. Dru touched the record. So, and it's really, really, really doing well. So I'm excited about what's happening. And this is the beginning of launching a inspirational division, a brand that I think will do really well in the marketplace.
I think I saw a video with Christopher Williams in the studio with
Yes,
you.
yeah, he's on a song. He's on a song. So it's with Jason Nelson, Christopher Williams, and Jason Nelson, and Eric Bellinger, and Aaron Hall on the same song.
You got Iron Hall back. Okay.
Yeah,
It's full circle
and
from I'm Dreaming.
full circle, because one, it has that New Jack. This particular song has that New Jack vibe written all over it, right? So I'm trying to wait to hear from Teddy, because I need Teddy to do what Teddy does. So we're going to see how that works out.
So is it like Quincy Jones Back on the Block, or like a Jimmy and Terry
Exactly.
volume? Okay.
That's the blueprint.
Okay. So how many singles should we expect on the album?
10, at least 10 to 11 singles.
Okay. And so and I don't, as I said, it's not like before where we go where you can tell the success through radio play and people buying it from the store. How is success of a song judged for yourself now? What would you deem as, well, this is actually doing well?
Well, you can gauge it by radio. You can gauge it by chart position. The goal is to have a top 10, top 5 single. That will set up the rest of the singles and bring recognition to the brand. So if we can get it there, and the world is embracing it, and people are loving it, then to me, mission accomplished.
Now being digital, I mean, you don't need to get Hype Williams directing $1 million video. Um, but do you then look at, okay, we need to do a lot of social media stuff and get the little videos? Because I like the little vignettes that you normally do with yourself in the studios, almost
Yeah.
like saying this is what's going on. Because that's the kind of behind the scenes stuff that that
Yes.
really gets us intrigued. Do you have a team just focused on, how to really sell the song visually and all these services?
Yes, we have a marketing team that's working behind the scenes. You'll start seeing more of videos and of the things that we're doing on the other songs, you'll start seeing a lot more visual content. So all of that is in the makings now.
Wow. So how do you juggle? So is your role just what's your role? What's your role now? I mean, being CEO, owner of the label, producer, writers, and everything. But what's your primary role so that you can make sure that one doesn't suffer because you're trying to put your hands everywhere?
Well, I mean, it's like my baby, my personal child that I'm birthing or giving life to. So I try to stay hands on everything. Finding songs, reaching out to the most incredible songwriters, producers to partner with me and to do some amazing collaborations and just kind of oversee the whole thing. But I have a team in place and I trust what they do and I trust what they bring to the table. So it's a collaborative effort for sure.
So as we wrap up, when you reflect back on your journey and stuff, what are what advice would you give for, I would say, for up and coming producers who are trying to get into the game today? Um, from your experience, from how you started off, you got the connection with Jam Master Jay and to where you are now. What would your advice be for up and coming producers?
Just do it and be great at it and never stop believing. I always say this, Namdi, if you're at a bus stop, right? Eventually the bus is gonna come, right? If it's the bus stop, right?
Yeah.
The bus is going to eventually come. And I say, if you're doing what you need to do and you where you need to be, the thing that you're waiting for will eventually show up. You just have to be prepared when it does. So, learn the craft, study to be better, study from the greats, and to continue to do what you do and compete with no one but yourself. Just be great and love it. Because if you don't love it, don't do it. That's it.
I mean, that advice actually transcends just music. Because I think about myself and what I'm doing, and think about times when I almost got distracted by looking at different other people who seem to have been a lot more successful, focusing on the gossip side. And I'm thinking, oh, I need to change stuff. And I know that my spirit wasn't agreeing with that, but it was like, but that seems to be getting the attention and having to go back to what the mission is and just working with that. And it can be tough because if you see people stepping out and doing things that make popular, you can forget your own calling and your mission and stuff. But then I think it's important we hear that your faith has stayed and hasn't wavered. No, well, I won't say hasn't wavered, but you've been anchored and you've taken precautions to make sure that you don't get sidetracked from, I would say, your mission. I'm sure when did your mom realize my baby has really made changing the world with his music? What was is it? I'm Dreaming, or what was the?
Nope, it was when I did a Shirley Caesar song.
You kidding me?
Way after platinum records, way after Dru Hill, way after Dreamin. The moment she found out I worked with Pastor Shirley Caesar, I made it to the big times. She didn't care about nothing else.
Oh, good. Did you get to introduce her to see some of these gospel artists like T.D. Jakes and Shirley Caesar?
Oh yes, absolutely, yes.
It's like most people saying that when until their families see them on Soul Train, they won't.
Yes, exactly.
I always end my interviews by asking my guests that if you're stuck in an elevator, what would be your favorite movie?
My favorite movie? Oh boy, as of late.
No. So the idea is that you're on an elevator and you're sort of stuck, and it's like it's going to take us 2-3 hours. So you get to pick your favorite movie to kill time. Your favorite movie ever that you'd like? Yeah, this is my song, my movie. I'll play it, watch it.
The Godfather.
Okay.
Because there's so many lessons, and I've watched it a million times, but every time I watch it, I learn something else. lessons on loyalty, and it's so many, besides the killing and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
There are some principles, in the dialogue. So it's one of my favorite movies.
Okay. And then what's your all-time favorite song?
Oh, Shirley Horn, Here's to Life.
Okay.
I love that song.
Okay.
You have to hear it. Listen, you should do yourself a favor, Namdi, and listen to Shirley Horn, Here's to Life. Game changer.
Okay. I'll do that.
Okay.
And finally, I always have to ask producers when I interview them, who would make your top 5 producers? In no particular order, but just who would be your top 5 producers?
Of course, Quincy. Of course, Babyface. Rodney.
Is it Babyface himself or LA and Babyface? So because you have to, they're two different.
LA and Babyface.
Okay.
I mean,
okay, you can't just have one because they're two different.
Yeah,
he had two.
Rodney and Teddy.
Okay, so you had Quincy, LA and Babyface, Rodney and Teddy. So he's got one more.
Now Rogers.
I
love Now. His approach. He's a signature sound.
Yeah, that with his guitar. Okay.
Yes, I love Now.
Wow. So Stanley, when are we going to expect I know the Sing God Is Good is out now, but when are we expecting full visuals for that, and then the rest of the stuff to drop so we can?
Well, we're working on this. We're having conversations in regards to a video, but we're mixing the second single that I told you with Aaron, Christopher, Eric Bellinger, and Jason Nelson next week. So we're working on that. So probably another month you'll have another single.
But visuals for the God Is Good before that as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We're just trying to work it out with Karen, Clark, and Kiara and their record labels to see what we can do to make that happen. But there will be some type of visual for that, something.
Would you guys go? Would you take the stuff on the road, the album, or the?
Definitely want to do something. I'm in talks of doing something with Lincoln Center, a night. Once the project is completed, the complete project is done, we want to probably do something at Lincoln Center.
Oh, so that could be the visuals for the album, and that could be.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yes. It's going to be a night at Lincoln Center.
Okay.
Yes.
That would be good. Something to look forward for Christmas and stuff.
Yes, we're going to make it work.
Yeah. Well, Stanley, it's been great. Really fascinated by your story about your, your journey, but also the fact that how you stay committed to your faith throughout that, and in an industry that I know too well. It can eat you up if you aren't faithful and steadfast. So it's been inspirational, and I definitely would look forward to hearing the full album and being able to let people see and know. If we websites and what's for Timeless Music Group, what's social?
Stanley A. Brown on Instagram at Stanley A. Brown, and on Timeless Music at Timeless Music Group.
Okay. On
Instagram, social media platforms.
Okay. Well, Stanley, it's been a pleasure. I know it's been a little long, but I just appreciate the time and everything. It's been great hearing your story, and we should look out for a book as well.
Yeah, 100%.
So we find out 100%. What happened to your dad and stuff.
Okay, you got it, man.
All right. Take care. Thanks a lot, Stanley.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for being part of the Halftime Chat community. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. But most importantly, why don't you consider being a member? That's a way of supporting the channel, but also getting a lot of videos ahead of time, a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and some exclusive content that doesn't get shared. But anyway, thanks for watching, and thanks for being part of Halftime Chat. I begin to